First, I guess thanks for coming, and in advance, thanks for your patience. This is going to be logistically a very, very difficult session of historic proportions. If you look at the maps around the Capitol of all the black spaces that are walled off, we're operating in a pretty small footprint of what we know as our state capitol. So we know we're going to try to be sensitive to accommodate the press as close as the confines are going to be here, so that we make sure that you can articulate to the public what's going on here, because it's going to be pretty tight confines around here once the public really gets involved in the building. Wanted to take a few minutes this morning to talk about the first 6 bills that the Senate is planning on introducing this morning. Not here to tell you they're the 6 most important things that are going to come out of this session, but there are 6 things that we think are important for Minnesota going forward that we want to make sure we get into consideration with the House. And the first one is something I think that all of you remember from back in June when the state went through some significant rainfall events, and 37 counties were declared disaster areas. We're going to lead with that to provide the state match to the federal FEMA money that came, and Senator Jensen, her area was significantly impacted by that, so we're going to have her discuss that with you this morning.
Thank you. Good morning. In June, the rain started to fall, and in the 4 counties that I represent, we were wondering if it was ever going to stop. Once it did stop, we were left with some substantial structural infrastructure damage, and throughout the state, as Senator Bach stated, 37 counties and 2 Indian reservations were declared federal disaster areas and were qualified for FEMA funding. So the Senate feels that the state share of that money that should be made available. It's a top priority to make sure that those funds are available to our communities and the people that live there. Also included in this bill is about $3 million. There are some roads and bridges that do not qualify for FEMA funding, but they do get funding through the Federal Transportation Highway Fund. And that's a 20% match that state money needs to be provided for that, so we're going to provide that as well in this bill. And then finally, there was ag land that was affected, and there were conservation projects that were destroyed and had damage. So we're going to provide about $2 million in that area as well, so that we can get those things taken care of. Like I said, 4 of my counties, all 4 of them in my district, did qualify for FEMA funds, but there were other counties that had substantial damage as well that did not qualify for FEMA funding, but there will be money for them as well in the $6.8 million that will be provided to make sure that our communities have what they need to be repaired and restored, and that connection and the partnership that we share with those communities is made whole as well.
Senate File 2 is going to be carried by Senator Stump. It's an idea that he brought to me that I can just tell you as the leader I'm pretty darn excited about. It is pretty clear in this economic recovery that right now we're getting to a point where the number of people looking for work is pretty close to the number of job vacancies that they are. But we just can't seem to figure out how to match up the people that are unemployed with the employers that have vacancies. There's a skill set gap. And much of that is in vocational and technical type careers. Senator Stump came to me with a tremendous idea recently that will be Senate File 2. And we don't know exactly how the House is going to respond yet. But much like the bill we're going to talk about with Senator Bonoff later, this is about workforce development and making sure that Minnesotans have the kind of skills that meet the needs of our employers. So we are going to propose this morning that at our MnSCU 2-year schools that graduating seniors can attend for free.
Thank you, Senator Bach, and good morning, everyone. There's a lot of details to be worked out, but I think if we go back a little over a year ago when the Capital Investment Committee went around the state, we I believe, visited about 400 different projects around all over the state. The one thing that, well, there were a couple things, but one thing that we found out is that there was a shortage out there, and employers were asking for skilled employees. And it didn't matter if we were in southwestern Minnesota or in the metropolitan area or northeast, employers wanted to have more skilled employees that they could hire. So last summer, I would like to take credit for this being totally my idea, but last summer I was listening to the news. Not sure who actually put it on the air first, but several states came out, just a few, Tennessee being one of them, that said they were going to allow graduating seniors to have the first 2 years of college would be paid for free by the state of Tennessee. So that concept stayed in my mind, and we started looking back through the history of the development of our tech colleges and community colleges, and actually the technical colleges were free all the way up until close to the, I think into the 70s. And the reason being is that they were part of the school districts. Over time, that kind of got changed dramatically, and so most of our school districts lost vocational programs. They were consolidated into technical colleges, and of course, that was a big loss, I think, for the state of Minnesota. So what we're trying to do is to encourage graduating seniors that if they follow the guidelines that we hope to put together, that they would be able to go to a community or a technical college and not have to pay tuition. And so there's several good reasons for the two-year institutions. It's a very efficient way to get those first 2 years of college done. It's cost effective. It's average tuition and fees at a two-year institution is about $5,000. The average tuition and fees for the public state universities is about $7,000 or $8,000. And those students that take this opportunity would end up getting a start and possibly saving about 50% of their, if they went on, they would save about 50% of their tuition. Plus, we hope that many young men and women would look at the skill side of the technical colleges. And I still remember out at Anoka Technical College talking with some young men and women who were in the welding program out there. And they would, after they graduated out of that program and get their certification and everything, they would make a very, very good living for their family by the skill that they learned in a relatively short time. I think it was a year or a year and a half program. So that's the concept. We're also, I think as this progresses and goes through committees, we would like to partner with what Tennessee calls partnering organizations. And what that really is looking for help to make this program successful. And if you heard, I'm sure you heard many times that Minnesota has very few high school counselors, one of the lowest state in the union in terms of counselors per students. So I think one of the things that would be very helpful is if we would partner with organizations such as the Minnesota Workforce Development Centers. We've had discussions how they could help with counseling, they could help with educating and helping, because there will be requirements that that these young men and women will have to do, such as submitting the applications, the FAFSA for financial aid. They'll have to be prepared and go to the orientations, and our hope is that many of these young men and women would not, or would go into a post-secondary education, whether it's the community college or the technical college, that probably would not go if this program was not in place. So we would be picking up a lot of first-time college, first-time students going to college. And that's a real important concept for Minnesota when, when we look at our workforce. We don't have a lot of the traditional kind of students. We have a lot of minorities, we have a lot of immigrants, we have a lot of kind of new students that need to have the opportunity of a secondary education. And I think that's going to open up some real opportunities across the state for those people who otherwise would not have that opportunity. And I could go on and hope that, if you have questions, we can answer them, or as this progresses through the legislative process, I think you'll certainly have more information. So, thank you.
As Leroy was speaking, it reminded me of something. My dad passed away a little over a year ago. After World War II, he went to Dunwoody for carpentry. And I can remember growing up, I kind of grew up in a family with a hands-on career. I can remember my dad telling me when I was very young, if you learn how to do something with your hands, you will never be hungry. And right now, unfortunately, we've got a whole lot of people unemployed that don't have the kind of skill set. We got employers that need people. So we're pretty excited about that. The third bill is something that Senator Clausen's going to carry that I can just tell you, being a rural member, I'm very, very close to. And the state for a long time has had a program where we have done loan forgiveness to doctors and dentists that are willing to practice in rural Minnesota. And unfortunately, during the plenty years when we had little or no money, that program pretty much withered away. So we're not reinventing the wheel here, because this was a priority before. I've met with the Minnesota Hospital Association and the University of Minnesota to talk about how acute this problem is. There is a significant growing problem. And just to give you a personal look at it, I went before Christmas and got my blood pressure medication renewed. No one should be surprised I'm on blood pressure medication. And I asked my doctor, I said, Bruce, how old are you? He said, I'm 65. I said, well, how old is Harold? He said, he's over 70. That is what much of rural Minnesota looks like in our healthcare facilities. And then I went to the dentist a couple days later, and I said, been my dentist for about 20 years. I didn't ask Dwayne how old he is, but he's older than me. I said, Dwayne, do you have enough dentists? And the Cook Area Health Services services a number of rural communities out of the Cook office. It's called Scenic Rivers. So those dentists service Cook and Floodwood and Big Fork and North Home and Tower. He said, Tom, we really need a couple of dentists really bad. And then I got a letter from the mayor of Ely. And he said to me, we have one dentist in Ely, and he's already told the community he's going to retire. He said, we then will have none. And I know it's difficult for some of my Metro friends to understand the challenge that presents, because if your dentist retired, you could probably send a little memo around the office, and somebody would probably have a suggestion of a dozen dentists that you could probably choose to find a new dentist, and it would be within some kind of a commutable distance. But when that happens in places like Ely, the closest dentist is going to be 50 miles away, either in Cook or in Virginia. And that also, there is a critical shortage developing of dentists across rural Minnesota. These healthcare professions are absolutely critical infrastructure in rural communities. I mean, we talk a lot about roads and workforce development, but the truth is you're never going to get a business to move to your community or expand in your community if you don't have healthcare, you don't have a clinic, you don't have a hospital. And we're at serious risk of not being able to have that kind of infrastructure in rural communities. This is, I met with Senator Clausen, and he agreed to carry this bill. This is something he's been doing some work on since he was elected. So I'm really pleased to have Senator Clausen join us and talk some about the loan forgiveness program.
Well, thank you and good morning. Healthcare is the fastest growing industry in the state of Minnesota. However, we are really not keeping pace with the industry workforce needs in all areas of our state. And this is especially true in rural and also underserved communities in our state. And to address this concern, the bill presented today provides targeted loan forgiveness to healthcare professionals who agree to practice in rural and underserved communities. And this initiative is actually a result of two legislative actions that I've been involved with for the past 2 years. In 2013, the legislature agreed to study and conduct a mental health workshop to look at workforce needs in the mental health industry. And so for the past year, over 30 mental health professionals have met monthly. We've conducted 7 public hearings around the state, and also in May of 2014, we held a mental health summit that was attended by over 150 mental health professionals, again, representing all areas of the state. The second initiative is ongoing. The 2014 legislature authorized a 2-year healthcare workforce commission to identify current and anticipated healthcare workforce shortages and also to evaluate the effectiveness of incentives to retain a highly skilled workforce. The commission met throughout the summer and fall of 2014 to develop preliminary recommendations for the 2015 legislature. Both groups recommended expansion of the health professional loan forgiveness programs to meet the needs of rural Minnesota and underserved communities. This expansion includes the addition of mental health professionals, including public health nurses, mental health professionals, nurses, and dental therapists to the state loan forgiveness program, and also authorizes additional funding. Thank you.
The fourth bill is going to be authored by Senator Sharon. She's unable to be here today, but Senator Eakin is going to speak to the issue of child protection and making sure that the people that are making decisions on child protection where children are, their safety is at risk, that we have the best possible system that acts in the children's best interest. The bill is going to contain recommendations. Many of you remember the governor put together a task force last fall on child protection. This is just really the first set of recommendations coming out of there. There'll be additional recommendations coming out of there, and some of those are likely to be incorporated in what you see today. Senator Eakin.
Thank you. And as Senator Bach said, this bill is being carried by Senator Sharon, who has served on the governor's task force on child protection. And this does incorporate 3 of those provisions. This is still a work in progress. Actually, there's going to be a hearing next Monday in the Health and Human Services Policy Committee at noon, and it's going to be an informational hearing to discuss further the recommendations being made by the governor's task force. But this bill is just a beginning. More is going to be added and incorporated from the task force recommendations as it moves forward. The bill, it's to protect all kids. This is one of our goals, one of our objectives, one of our primary goals in 2015 with this child protection legislation that pursues these 3 recommendations. The bill would put in place stronger protections for children facing possible maltreatment. And as Senator Bach had mentioned, it was last fall, I guess, that the governor's task force was put into place. And it followed the tragic death of Eric Dean. We want to make sure nothing like that ever happens again. The three main changes include keeping records of maltreatment for 5 years instead of 1, also allowing the screeners to look at those reports of maltreatment that occurred that were not investigated as well as those that were. It also allows screeners to seek collateral information when making screening decisions as to how to protect the children. And it requires county agencies to increase their reviews as well. These three components of this bill will give professionals in the process of determining the welfare of a child all the information they need to make the best decisions possible. So, thank you.
Senator Bonoff is going to carry Senate File 5, and it's something she has put a lot of effort into and brought a large group of stakeholders together from the business community to talk about as we approach higher education, how can we make sure that the skill set coming out of our higher educational system match the needs of employers. So to me, to a carpenter, it's kind of a workforce development bill. When she initially came to me with it, she was calling it the pipeline. And then I said, what the heck is that? And she went through the acronym. And that dog's not going to hunt. So I told her, I said, we have to find an easier way to talk about this that Minnesotans are going to understand. So I'm hoping today she's going to tell us that we've got something a little easier than the acronym of the pipeline to talk about it. But clearly, this skills gap is real. We want to make sure that people have the skills when they're done with their higher education that meet the needs of employers. And the notion of creating and I'm somebody who understands apprenticeship because I was the coordinator for the Carpenters Apprenticeship Program on the Iron Range for a long, long time. Apprenticeship is a tremendous way to get young people to experience what an occupation and a career is going to be like. And making that available in more careers, more employment opportunities, I think will make sure that people land with careers that are something that they'll want to continue to pursue, and we can stop some of this job hopping and that's happening as people kind of career hop through their working careers. So, Senator Bonoff.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Senator Bach, and thank you for your partnership on this project. And Senator Bach's right. He did tell me I had to lose the pipeline project name, and I think it wouldn't have been so important had we not all been reading about the potential veto and a lot of controversy around pipelines. So I'm here to tell you about a dual education, earn while you learn proposal. How's that, Senator Bach? So we have been working on this for quite some time. So while I'm sharing this today, I stand here with the support of so many others, and I would like to just thank them for their work as well. So the Deputy Commissioner of the Department of Labor and Industry, Jessica Lumen, has been leading this effort along with Heather McGannon, who's the project manager on it. I've been working with colleagues in the Senate and in the House, Senator Senjum and Nelson, Representative Norton. And we have been working in partnership with literally over 30 Minnesota businesses who have been meeting over the summer and the fall to identify, is this something that we in Minnesota can do? As we look at the pressing problems of today, you've got your, we talk about the unemployment being so low, and that's wonderful, and that's really true when you look at the big picture, but if you drill down, we actually have some grave problems. The youth unemployment rate is very, very high. The outstate unemployment rate does not mirror what's happening in the metro area. In addition, our companies are saying they have a harder time filling their positions than ever before. They can't find the skilled workers they're looking for. So there is some kind of a disconnect. And as we look for solutions, we see pockets of them all over this country and frankly all over the world. So I first learned about this approach in my very own district. Buehler Corporation called me 3 years ago to come to a ribbon cutting where they were announcing that they were going to start their apprenticeship approach here in Minnesota, their North American headquarters. They interviewed high school students in the surrounding communities, the northwestern suburbs. They picked 5 high school graduating seniors. They hired them. They contracted with Dunwoody. They developed a 3-year training program. They paid for those students to go to Dunwoody to school, and the first cohort is now graduated and working at Dunwoody at very high salaries. They've now done that for 2 more cohorts, and so you have to ask the question, can this be brought to scale? Can this be used in, for example, the IT industry, where we have a real need for computer coders and programmers? Can we use it in agriculture, where they're saying, who knew this, that we have a shortage of agronomists? In the healthcare fields, there's so many different areas where there's needs, and we have students with pressing debt. So, in summary, what the bill sets forward is an approach that says the state is going to partner with business, make available through deed state funding in grant form for companies to apply for. Those grant dollars would be used to support the students' classroom-related instruction. The companies would pay the students, thus the earn while you learn, as well as provide on-the-job training. It is our hope that in doing that, our kids can actually leave the post-secondary experience with credentials, with relevant knowledge and experience. We can begin to change the trajectory of the cost, debt burden on students and their families, and perhaps Minnesota can become a model leading the nation. And finally, I want to make sure that people understand this is happening today. In South Central Minnesota, we have Dr. Annette Parker at South Central College, who's received a federal grant to work with the community colleges in that area and the local businesses to do this very thing. It's happening in places like North Carolina with Siemens, a corporation. It's happening in New York. So the model is out there. As Senator Bach said, the trades have been doing this successfully for decades. It's important that we learn from what works and that we find a way to do it with a Minnesota flavor. So I look forward to answering questions. Whenever you start something new, there's going to be hiccups and bumps, and we'll use the committee process to make sure we do it in a way that works for our companies, our students, our higher ed institutions, and our families. Thank you very much.
Thanks for putting the Rukavina step stool away. Well, two years ago, I tell you we stood here, but I believe we didn't. I believe we were up in room 125 when we announced what our session agenda was likely to encumber in the 2013 year. And one of the things that we led with, and I think it was Senate File 2, maybe Senate File 3, was the state was going to pay for all-day kindergarten for every kid in the state. And I'm very, very pleased to stand here today and want to thank the governor and the House Democrats for being willing to grab on to the Senate's leadership on all-day K. Senate File 6, we hope to take it to the next level and start to invest more dollars in pre-kindergarten in our public school system so that more and more of our kids are more prepared to enter kindergarten. So early childhood funding, there have been a lot of studies done, right, about the tremendous payback that has in our society as young learners that are prepared for kindergarten and elementary school have much less problems along the way. Their earning capacities stronger, their crime rates are lower. There just are a lot of good reasons to invest in early childhood. So I'm really pleased today that Senator Hoffman is here. Senator Hoffman, because he's a longtime school board member and understands the K-12 education system and understands the importance of early childhood. So Senator Hoffman.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Bach, and welcome. I was first intrigued by the notion of school readiness years ago when I heard Dr. Barnhart talk about the Perry School project that was done and the preschool project that was done in North Carolina. And having spent my early 20s and early 30s doing early childhood work, both on the federal level and the state and local level, we kept saying, what's the one predictor that's going to get somebody ready for kindergarten? And there's a good continuum of services and support in the school system, including preschool. And so what we have in front of you today is a 4K for kids. And in my 8 years on the Anoka-Hennepin School Board, we initiated a preschool readiness, school readiness program, and it showed that the benchmarks that were established for kindergarten actually were moved. You saw that children that were part of the preschool experience, and it wasn't free. Parents, there was a payment as well. There's co-pays, there's a whole funneling of different ways that it's paid for. But what happened is that 90% of the children that were from that preschool experience, not only were they ready for kindergarten, but they moved to kindergarten benchmark. And so what you started to see was school districts put in a pre-K through 12th grade curriculum continuum. And you hear the conversation about pre-K through 3rd grade. And so this makes sense. One thing about what's enriched about Minnesota is we've always had choices. This gives us a choice. But this is a choice built on the infrastructure that we know works in the state of Minnesota, an infrastructure of school readiness, an infrastructure of early childhood education within our public school system. I'm excited to bring this forward, and I'm excited to work with folks to make sure that this, at the end of the day, is a really good piece of work. So thank you very much for being here. And Katie Sieben, Senator Sieben, would like to say some things about it as well.
Thank you, Senator Hoffman. I just wanted to add an additional point that Minnesota has among the highest participation of women in the workforce of any state in the country. And so an added benefit of the 4K bill that Senator Hoffman is going to carry is that it will help families' economic security. It will help the middle class throughout Minnesota, because when children are in school at an earlier age, they have the benefit of being more prepared for kindergarten, but it will also help families' economic security in that families won't be paying as high of costs for daycare costs, and the children will be getting a good education. Thank you.
Well, you're probably asking, where's transportation? That is, we anticipated that question coming from you. That is why we brought Senator Dibble down, so that he can talk about that some. Clearly, that is going to be an important agenda item for the governor. The House talked about it. The House Republicans talked about it a lot on the campaign trail. It's not lost on us. So, Senator Dibble.
Thank you. Yes, I'm here to just remind everyone that transportation is going to be an extremely important focus for the Senate this year as well. We're not going to be introducing the bill today. We'll be introducing it next week, probably on Monday, so I'm not prepared to unveil the bill. I don't want to step on all my colleagues' fantastic ideas here today, but I did just want to mention quickly and briefly that the case has been very, very well made over the past few years. We, of course, last passed somewhat of a transportation package in 2008. At that time, you know, of course, that was a function of a veto override, and as such, was a fairly tortured process and a very, very minimal bill. And we said at that time, this isn't even half a loaf. This is probably not even a third of a loaf. And we're going to be back sooner rather than later. We're not going to torment ourselves for another 20 years before we have to get back to this work. I've had the benefit and pleasure and great honor of traveling the whole state this last year, and have spoken with city officials and county officials and members of the business community, labor, education folks, and the like. And to a person, they've all said, if we're going to maintain and sustain this sort of economic success in Minnesota, if we're going to do for Greater Minnesota what needs to be done so that their experience of shared prosperity is similar to that in the metro area, we have to make investments in transportation. Transportation is one of those things that is kind of a paradox. It's that thing that allows your economy to thrive and succeed, but if you don't do it well, it becomes the constraint, the chokehold on your ability to compete for the emerging workforce, on the ability for seniors to access opportunities and stay in their homes, for young people to have the kind of transportation options they need and get to their educational opportunities. We know, and we'll see Move Minnesota speaking a little bit later this morning, really laying the case and advocating for a robust package. And we know some of the things that they're going to discuss, the fact that we're going to have perhaps approaching 1 million people coming to the state, in 1 million people in the next 10 or so years. You know, where are we, how are those folks going to get around? We know that we're not keeping up with the roadway system that we have presently. We're not maintaining it. That was abundantly obvious in my travels around the state when you saw the crumbling shoulders and the lack of shoulders and the lack of 10-ton roads so that commodities can't get to market. We know the constraints we have in the railroad industry now. We're going to have to address railroad industry issues. And we also know in the metro area, only about 15% of the jobs that we have in the metro area are easily accessed by a transit commute. Many, many people simply can't get to the jobs in the metro area. That speaks directly to some of the issues that were raised earlier. So we're going to have a great package. We're going to be a state, if we pass this package, that competes and continues to thrive and share its prosperity. And we're going to bring and attract young people to this state. We heard yesterday in One Minnesota how we're not doing a good job of hanging on to our 20-some year olds, and we're not doing a good job of bringing them here. And that directly speaks to the gap in the ability to fill jobs. So look forward to talking more about the particulars of the package. I'd say listen closely to the governor and what he has to say. Listen closely to Move Minnesota, coalition of 200 organizations, business, labor, local leaders, education, you name it. They're a part of this whole effort to move this agenda forward. My package is going to mirror those. I shouldn't say my package, our package, because we're developing it all together with a team of folks, a team of senators, is going to mirror what they're talking about very closely. Thank you.
We will be happy to take questions.
How much is this going to cost? And where are you going to get the money?
Well, first let me remind everybody there is not a lot of money, but we're in a position of having some money because of the work of the last 2 years, and this is the, I guess it feels like at least, the first kickoff of a biennium where we haven't stood here trying to figure out how to manage the crisis. Who are we going to borrow from? What kind of accounting measures can we use to keep the state's budget in balance? So it feels darn good to be here today and be talking about important investments that are going to move our state forward, not cobbling together some kind of a budget with a bunch of gimmicks and borrowing in it. So it feels awful good, but just want to remind you, that was the work of the last 2 years, and especially last year. This $1 billion that everyone is talking about, remember when we adjourned in May, we left $603 million unspent, knowing that we wanted to make sure that this incoming legislature and incoming governor had a clean sheet of paper to address the priorities that they heard about on the campaign trail. So the answer to the question, Don, is we don't know. I think it is fair to say, though, and things are scalable. I mean, we will scale this into a budget that does not include general fund tax increases. I don't see a need for that. There are probably some interest groups are going to be disappointed that their priorities didn't get addressed or didn't get addressed to the extent that they wanted them. But we will figure out how to fit this general fund spending into the available revenue. And I can just tell you in the Senate, we were very much a part, and the governor was very much a part, and Speaker Thiessen was very much a part of making sure that we're in the position that we're in today to be able to make important investments going forward.
You don't know how much each will cost?
No, because MMB doesn't price things out until you actually request for a bill hearing. So even if we want, they don't even do it confidentially. So, I mean, on Senator Stump's proposal, for example, on the idea of providing tuition-free vocational school, all I saw was some numbers, and it wasn't even of the number of pupils. It wasn't even broke out on how many were Minnesota residents and how many are not. So once we actually get the bill drafted and request a hearing, that's the point in time in which MMB will provide us with fiscal notes on what things cost.
But follow up on that, do you think it'll be more than that $1 billion?
No.
Okay.
How about Greater Minnesota? Your first few bills clearly address issues in Greater Minnesota. Are you kind of beating House Republicans to the punch here?
No, I think what we're noticing is how well the metropolitan area is doing. And I saw an email this morning out of the governor's office about the unemployment rate. The state unemployment rate is as low as it's been since 2001. And what I know, coming from rural Minnesota, know that everyone doesn't feel that. There are clearly areas in this state where the economic recovery has not taken a foothold. And there is critical infrastructure that is necessary for those areas to participate in the recovery. And that critical infrastructure is availability of health care. It is workforce development and skill sets that match the needs of those employers. And I probably don't need to remind you, most of those vocational colleges are in rural Minnesota. And the goods and services produced in this state largely come from rural Minnesota. That's where the natural resources are. That's where the paper is made. Most of the jobs in the paper industry, for example, and I mentioned that because I sat with the CEO of Boise Cascade last night, but you know, we make the paper, we send it to the Twin Cities, and this is where much of the value gets added. This is where the printing is done. This is where all the cutting is done, and packaging is done of much of it. But rural Minnesota is absolutely critical to the success of the metropolitan area also. And we have our employers in rural Minnesota in many occupational areas can't find the people. It's pretty clear we have a skills gap, and it seems like that is one of the areas we have to address if rural Minnesota's economy is going to recover.
Are some of your rural members vulnerable too heading into the next election cycle? Does this help them out?
I think it helps Minnesota out. This isn't about politics. I think we will find tremendous bipartisan support in the Senate for much of what we laid out this morning.
Your proposals largely assume a lot of the costs that people would face, you know, college tuition costs, daycare, or student debt. They're likely on the other side to propose tax cuts that you know, stop the money from coming in the first place. Why did you choose this route over that route?
Well, I was here in 2003 and was the author of Governor Plenty's tax-free zone bill. And I mean, I give him credit. At least he had an idea, right? And frankly, it failed. I mean, we created an environment of total tax-free environment for business expansions. No sales tax, no income tax, no property tax, and it failed. I just do not believe that you can drive economic development by reducing a business's taxes. Because one, you have no assurance that it's going to get passed on to build the business. And you have no assurance it's not just going to go to the bottom line, to go to dividends or to go to other things, that it's going to be reinvested in the business. If someone could assure me that we're going to cut business taxes, that money was going to get reinvested in the business, I would be more sensitive to the idea of business tax relief. But I just don't think the facts and the data bear out the fact that if you cut taxes, your economy will grow. I just think there's no data that shows that's an accurate path to go down.
There were a couple bills that sought to address the skills gap. Is the skilled worker shortage widespread, or is it in certain industries? And are lawmakers thinking more long-term, specifically the shrinking labor force and how it's going to grow more slowly?
Well, I think some of it is driven by the fact that if you talk to the state economist, she will tell you that I think I said it earlier, the number of people unemployed is pretty close to the number of vacancies we have. Well, why do we have any unemployment at all then, right? If businesses are looking for about the same number of people as we have unemployed, and as this labor market continues to tighten, the state is going to have to invest some money in skill enhancement if we're going to get this unemployment rate any lower, if businesses are going to have the talent that they need to continue to grow and prosper. And it is all exacerbated by the fact of this big bubble of baby boomers moving out into retirement. And it's a lot of people that businesses are going to have to replace. I just will tell you, I met with one of our Fortune 500 companies 2 years ago, a company that I'm very, very proud that Minnesota is home. And I asked them the question, I said, what's the biggest challenge facing this Minnesota giant? Now, that was raw meat I offered up, right? And if you talk to the business lobbyists around here, they would all tell you, you got to cut our taxes and we're going to grow. You know what they said? 5 years from now, 30% of our workforce is going to be eligible for retirement. And we're a research and development company. And how successful we are at replacing those people is going to totally determine the success of our company going forward. I have heard that from business leaders from very large and very small companies all over this state, that if they're going to continue to grow and be successful, especially in this tightening labor market, we are going to have to do more to improve the skill set of some of our unemployed Minnesotans, because these unemployed people are the pool that we're going to have to draw from. This is a hard place to draw people to move to, right? It's a little cold out there. Not everybody is enamored with the idea of it being cold enough that we shut our schools down in the winter time. So recruitment of people to move here is just not that easy. The environment actually works against us for a big piece of the year. Now, the other half of the year, we're a beautiful place to be, but except for our snowbirds, most of us are here all year. But this tightening job market is part of the reason that we think workforce development, improving people's skill set is very, very important to our success.
Sorry, I had a follow-up. On the skills gap, for the Minsky bill, are there specific locations or programs that are going to be eligible for the 2-year free tuition?
No, and I think we don't know that. That's what we're going to find out when we start to have public testimony. The one thing I do know about the Minsky system is it isn't very nimble. And it might be doing a better job right now than it has previously, but still is nowhere near where it needs to be, that those campuses and those communities meet the needs of the employers kind of in that commutable distance. And part of the reason they're not is it's just pure money. I mean, they can't develop new programs without resources to develop new programs. So they have a hard time shifting with the needs of employers. So we're going to have some discussion with them about that. Is there some programming that we're not doing that would be helpful to address the needs of employers?
I have to get my stool. I just wanted to add on to your question with regard to particular industries, because if you read the legislation that came through last session, we did identify 4 key industries that we know the demand is going to be the greatest and holds the greatest potential: advanced manufacturing, IT, agriculture, and health sciences. And so the bill is laid out, though, to allow any industry that's interested to come into this approach, as long as the Department of Labor and Industry can identify competency standards that are agreed upon by all, because we don't want to have a hodgepodge of, customized training all over the state. That's not effective or efficient, and certainly would be costly. So we want to make sure that we have agreed upon competency standards, that the industry says this will meet our needs, and then the state can enter into that public-private partnership. I also do want to thank Senator Tomassoni, who's been a key partner in this effort, and I neglected to mention his name.
Yeah, some economists would say
Two is what you get.
When you talk about pre-K, are you talking about universal pre-K, every kid? And I mean, is that something you phase in? Is there eligibility requirements for funding? I mean, how does that work? It's a lot of kids.
It's a lot of kids, but you also remember Minnesota is a land of opportunity for choices, and this is a volunteer program that already takes advantage of our existing infrastructure within our public school system. You have school readiness, early childhood family ed, you got early childhood special education, you got scholarships that are still going to be available for families. So it really enhances and builds what we know is works well within our research-driven field.
How many kids do you think you can aid?
The program is certainly scalable, but what we do know is that close to 15,000 children in Minnesota, when they reach kindergarten, are not prepared. So we're really targeting those children. But it's also important to note that a lot of families can't afford to send their children to high-quality preschool programs. We also know that the public school system around Minnesota, in rural parts of Minnesota, in the metro, and in St. Paul public schools, for instance, have public 4K programming that is having tremendous results. And we look forward to talking about those results as the bill moves forward.
How many kindergartners are there each year? You said 15,000 aren't prepared.
15,000 aren't prepared. I don't know. I think it's like 30,000 or 35. I don't have it in front.
So half are not prepared?
Correct. Roughly half are not prepared for kindergarten when they enter.
Senator Bonham, for a second. Is there the capacity within the Minsky schools to take on what could be an influx of new students if the free vocational ed is in fact offered?
So Senator Stumpf brought this idea forward in the recent weeks. I do not believe Senator Stumpf has yet had that conversation, and that's certainly something that they'll want to talk about.
You know, kind of on that, Brian, Senator Stumpf's proposal is not something that we can immediately implement next fall. It's probably only going to have a cost in 1 year of the biennium, and the reason for that is the students will make the applications during their senior year of high school and get into the pipeline to be eligible for this. The thing I think you need to think about when you start thinking, oh my gosh, this is going to be expensive. Remember, we're paying part of the cost of that now through the state grant program for students that can't afford the tuition. So some of this cost the state is already paying, some of it is being paid by federal Pell Grants. This is not going to be all state money, but we're hoping that we can buy down the tuition portion that's not currently being paid for by those pupils.